Howdy YouTubers, today I'm covering ThorFire's VG10. This is the set that comes with charger as well as their own branded batteries. These are 3000 milliamps hour, and within here they also do provide a pretty decent amount of spare accessories. So you got a spare tail cap switch, 3 O-rings, spare tail cap cover, a lanyard, as well as a spare glass. They do also include a holster as well. This holster, however, doesn't feature a quick release Velcro. It's rather what I like to call the permaloop. And last but not least, of course, the instruction manual, and within here, so just cover you off on some quick specs of the lights. There's 4 output levels of high, medium, low, and a moonlight level. I'm not going to cover each individually. You can read that yourself. The peak beam intensity is 11.2K candela, which translates to 280 meter beam distance, 1 meter impact resistance, IPX to 2 meters, and those accessories which I previously covered. So in case you missed my review of their TG06, when they first contacted me, I was just a little skeptical because of the name ThorFire, and as I covered, anything with blah 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 fire other than Surefire made me a little skeptical because it's that generic branding and then you kind of feel like they were knockoffs. But ultimately, I was very impressed by the TG06, especially in consideration of the price. Although that particular light suffered from PWM, it did bring a strong value proposition in the sense that the cost was very low, and in consideration of what you got, that was pretty good. Now, the VG10 follows that same line in the sense that this currently retails for $26.99 for the flashlight only, and then $35.99 for the set, including a 3 amp hour battery as well as the charger. So I think that represents a pretty decent value, but let's dig into this light now and see how well that value holds up. And those prices are as of the time of this review currently on Amazon.com. So right off the bat on the business end, you can see this light does feature a very light AR coating. I don't know if it's double-sided or not, but I'm just putting my Casio watch by comparison. You can see there. It does feature an XM-L2 LED. There's nothing new about that, but for what it's worth, here's a close-up shot of that. It does feature a removable stainless steel bezel, and getting it off, it's a little bit rough. Kind of feel like those threads aren't exactly, at least the initial portion wasn't too refined. Removing the bezel gives you access to the lens so that you could replace it, as well as being able to take out that reflector. Now, just after the bezel, there are 5 heatsink fins to help cool off the light, and this head is actually detachable from here. And I just want to point out that these are actually square cut threads, as was the stainless steel bezel, and both the threads on the head itself as well as the body is anodized, so you could lock it out from the head as well. It does also come with the stainless steel clip pre-installed. Now, this clip is fairly stiff, unlike the TG06 one, so it does require a fair amount of force to remove and install. On the tail end of the light, there is a tactical ring that is removable along with the tail cap, and there are these tail guards on either end of the button that does allow it for tail standing, but perhaps not the most stable. It is a little wobbly. And unlike their TG06, this switch is a forward clicky. Unlike some lights, this tactical ring is much wider than the body itself, so there's no issues. You don't actually have to remove that O-ring, as was with the case, I don't know, maybe my memory serves me right, it was the ThruNite TI-10 or 11 series that had that issue where you had to remove the ring first before you put this on, but this one comes straight off. There is a hole there, so I guess you could attach the lanyard on it. Unfortunately, this hole is not particularly large, so a slight problem getting this included ring in. I mean, if you were careful with it, you could get it in, but here you can see that already I've nicked the finish there. So, finish isn't too strong. The ring can be installed reverse, so if you have a particular preference either way, so that way it allows you to hold it in a cigar grip this way or with the flat side the other way. Both ends do feature a reasonably strong spring, so I guess it helps with recoil in case you decide to get this gun mounted. Plus, that also allows the use of flat top cells, like in the case of this Moly cell, because you don't have a tip there, that spring can allow a connection. The 2 springs combine to allow a decent amount of play, so it could accommodate a pretty short cell like this AWIMR, which fits pretty much just about flush with the end of the tail cap, or their own cell, which is actually pretty large at 69.7 millimeters total in length, which, as you can see, sticks out a fair bit there. But as I mentioned, no problems accommodating either length of those cells. As with the TG06 on the tail end side, there's that nice brass retaining ring that holds down the switch itself, and one particular implementation I do like is that that retaining ring is smaller than the mating surface that does make connection with the barrel of the light itself, so that way as you're taking off the cap or putting it back on, it won't twist the retaining ring itself, thus no issues of it coming loose accidentally. And that pretty much wraps up the main features of this light. In terms of the overall size, the VG10 is what is known as a turbo head. What that simply means is that the head of the light is larger than the overall barrel. So in the case of the TN12 2014 model here, as you can see, pretty much everything is streamlined, right? As is with the Olight M18 Maverick and the Xeno S3A. The turbo headlights would be like the Z2 Combat Light, Xenos G10 V2, the VG10 itself, and of course Nikor's P25, which is pretty much one of the largest 18650 size lights to date that I've handled or reviewed. Of course, if you wanted to get into like a little bit fun or craziness, this is one of the creations you can concoct with a giant super turbo size head, as well as a 18650 size barrel. Bottom line, it runs about roughly mid-pack compared to some of its contemporaries. The overall fit and finish, as I had discovered during a review of their TG06, was that it's pretty decent, especially in consideration of the price point. That's always a factor when reviewing their lights. I feel that that's one of their main forte. Overall, I gotta say, it's not shabby at all. The laser engraving is all nice and sharp with no blotchiness whatsoever. The finish, as we had discovered earlier when I was trying to install that lanyard ring on the tactical ring there, as you can see, put two small little nicks in it, so it doesn't give a lot of confidence that this is true HA3, which they had advertised it as. But the anodizing finish is pretty decent. As I had mentioned earlier when I was trying to remove this bezel, it didn't feel quite that smooth. But I think that that was due to some grit that was left in there, because now it does operate smoothly now that I actually have it removed and reinstalled. That bezel does mount back completely flush with the head of the light itself. All these surfaces, at least where it counts, is fully deburred. I don't feel like there's really any issues with the machining, with perhaps the exception of these oblong grooves here. And that's reminiscent of Through Night's TN1011 when they first released it. I remember there was really sharp edges there. But this one, not too bad. I think it's more of, like say, this particular one is totally fine. But this one right here, it's just a tad little bit sharp. But overall, it really shouldn't cause any issues at all. Likewise for the grooves on the tail cap in it itself. Now, if there was one particular nitpick I would have about this light, it seems like it has to do with that switch itself. It does operate with a very solid tactile feedback, but sometimes I just feel as I'm operating it, as you saw there, it's almost like it changes mode depending on how fast or how slow I click it. Operating it quickly is okay. Right there. You saw that little jump. I don't know what that's contributed to, but it's almost like it's shifted down in mode. So consider that one click, 2 clicks. So maybe later I'll take it apart, but so far that's one nitpick in terms of the overall fit and finish of this light. In the end, I would rank their lights just one notch below the top tier lights that I personally consider to be the best in terms of fit and finish after reviewing tons of those, which would be like Nikkor, Through Night, Sunwayman, Xeno. Those are really solid lights. So again, overall, not bad at all. Now, I've got the lights to demonstrate the beam profile. The VG10 was conceived as a thrower. I do have it on my right hand side here. And with the smooth reflector, it does give the light a pretty tight hotspot with decent punch. However, though, there is some ringiness on the overall outer edge here that won't quite show up on the camera. I'm going to try to see if I could step it down to get that to show, but here you can see, step down, just how tight that beam is. And what I'm seeing in real life is that there is actually a ring on the corona of the beam out here that is not being captured. Now, by comparison, on the left hand side, I have ThorFire Z2 Combat Light, and this one is housing a EDC Plus X60L P60 drop-in, and it does feature a lightly orange peel reflector, so thereby you can see it's a much smoother beam, a slightly broader hotspot, and that is a original XM-L2 running at 1C10, so it is a little bit cooler. Now, I don't know what bin, color bin I should say, the VG10 is, but that color that you're seeing on the screen there is relatively accurate as compared to what I'm seeing in real life. perhaps it's not as greenish. It's a little bit more geared towards yellowish. But overall, it's pretty accurate. And these two are on similar levels. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but as you can see, the VG10 on the right with the pure smooth reflector has a tighter hotspot, and the X60L drop-in with that light orange peel reflector has a broader hotspot and smoother beam. Actually, I've tilted this at an angle so now you can see that ring that I was alluding to earlier on the outer edge there. It's kind of a little hard to capture, but even there you can see it right now. And that is being caused by the stainless steel bezel that someone had once pointed out to me, but I flat out refused to agree with him until I actually tested it out myself, so I ate a humble pie. But as you can see, with that stainless steel bezel removed, that ringiness is gone. Now, not that you can use the light this way. Of course, I always have to disclaim that because of that one guy who told me that you can't use the light that way. Yes, I know you can't use it that way, but I didn't realize I have to disclaim it every time. I figured it should have been obvious, but in case it's not, no. I mean, you could carefully use the light in this manner, but you just got to be careful or mindful of the lens falling out. As an initial conclusion, I got to say again, I'm very impressed by the value proposition, but not just that. Never mind the value, I just feel like this is a very solid offering from ThorFire. It's got 4 reasonably well-spaced levels. The fit and finish overall is pretty good, with the exception, like I said, perhaps the HA3 finish is not quite up to par yet. That switch is perhaps the other thing that's a little bit of a letdown on this light, plus not to mention PWM. So this light, like the TG06, does use PWM. And an interesting thing I found out was that for some reason it emitted this whine. It is at the head, and especially when it's shining on a black object. So case in point, okay, I'm going to turn this on, and it was this level. Already there's an audible whine, so I'm going to put this right next to the microphone. But the funny thing is, like I said, if you take a black object and you block the LED emitter with it, I think you could hear that, right? It increases. When you stop blocking it, that whining level goes down. It's interesting. I think I read about that somewhere. I cannot remember the exact effect that is. If anyone remembers, please throw it into the comments and enlighten us all. But in the meanwhile, I mean, that shouldn't be an issue unless for whatever reason it is you're setting the light down on a black object, and it really shouldn't be an issue. Aside from that, I am currently waiting on my new light meter, so in the interest of time, I'm not going to hold back this review. I will get into the run times as well as the beam measurements in the, I guess maybe a supplementary video, not necessarily a part 2. I will also have a separate video covering the charger too, as well as the charging algorithm and maybe a charging / discharge curve of their battery that they provided. But overall, for 36 bucks, it's a very solid offering, especially in consideration of its competitors out there. It casts a pretty decent beam. Overall build quality isn't too bad. That issue that I had with the bezel initially, that was because I think there was some metal debris that was caught in there, thereby it was snagging. But now that I got it out, super smooth. And as I highlighted previously, it reinstalls completely flush without any issues. I didn't get a chance to swap out the switch. I will do that in the future and report back whether or not that issue with that light changing modes is still happening. But bottom line, like I said, wow, ThorFire, great job, man. Keep up the good work. I would really like to see if maybe you guys could look into some constant current circuit. And you know what? Just throw a feeler out there. Put it onto the forum. Just say, hey, you know, this is what we're thinking. This is how much the incremental cost would potentially be. And get a show of hands to see who would be willing to pay the extra for those constant current. But even without that, as it is, again, great job, man. Solid offering. As part of FTC disclosure, the VG10 kit was provided by ThorFire for review. Thanks again for watching.